Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my Would You Read It Challenge belated video for July 2025. I'm posting this in August 2025, so I'm catching up. But anyway, the Would You Read It Challenge was started by Etu Brody. He envisioned it as a way to pick up a variety of books, read the first sentence of each book, and then ask your audience if they would like to continue with it. I thought one sentence just isn't fair enough. It's not enough material. So I elongated it to about the first page of a book. And I have been playing with old ballots of the BookTube Prize. So the BookTube Prize was started by Robert Sheard in 2019 as a way for the literary bookternet to come together and judge the best in U.S. published English language fiction and nonfiction, always published the year before. So, we're going strong in 2025. I'm an official judge. We're judging 2024 releases. This is the final round. There are 4 rounds to whittle down our long list throughout the year. And so now we're in the final round, at the end of which we'll get to the winners and runners-up. I can't talk about any of that as part of the rules of judging, but I can go back to ballots of yesteryear. So what I've been doing is reading from each of the Octofinal ballots, the long list ballots of the fiction prize, going back to the beginning of the prize. It's a fun way to, at least give each of these books a little bit of a try. And this video I'm in year 2022, looking at the Octofinals fiction group E. In my last Would You Read It Challenge video, I hadn't read any of the books on the ballot, but this time I've read all of the books on the ballot because, in fact, I judged this exact ballot back in 2022. So it's kind of weird and fun to revisit, these old books I haven't read now for a couple of years. I did make a video back at the end of the Octofinals where I, ranked the books and gave my thoughts, and I haven't watched that in a long time either, so it'll be interesting to see how much I, accurately remember as to what I felt, immediately after reading those books versus what I remember of them now. But I will link to that video down below. And in the meantime, I'm just going to start fresh and I'm going to share the first pages with you and then give my thoughts, I guess, on the first pages as well, and then also what I remember of what I thought of the entire books. So without further ado, let's get into it. Starting with book number 1, Song. We are the earth, the land, the tongue that speaks and trips on names of the dead as it dares to tell these stories of a woman's line. Her people and her dirt, her trees, her water. We knew this woman before she became a woman. We knew her before she was born. We sang to her in her mother's womb. We sang then and we sing now. We called this woman back through the years to our early place, to our bright shoots rising with the seasons. We knew her mingled people, how they started off as sacred hummed verses. And now we go back through the centuries to the beginning of her line, to the village called the place in the middle of the tall trees. And we start with a boy, the child who will change everything on our land. Wait. We know you have questions such as, if we tell the story of a woman's line, why would we begin with a boy? And to your wonder we counter, we could have begun with a bird's call or with a stalk of corn, with a cone from a tree or a tendril of green. All of these things lead back to this woman's line, whether we mention them or not. Yet, since our story does not follow a straight path, we travel to places here and across the water. We must keep to the guidance of time, to the one who first walked past a tall, grass-covered mound in a particular place of the woods. And we have questions as well, for despite our authority, we cannot know everything. And that was from The Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois by Honoré Fanon Jeffers. Book 2, Part 1. When we were new, Rosa and I were mid-store on a magazine side table and could see through more than half of the window. So we were often able to watch the outside, the office workers hurrying by, the taxis, the runners, the tourists, Beggar Man and his dog, the lower part of the RPO building. Once we were more settled, manager allowed us to walk up to the front until we were right by the window display, and then we could see how tall the RPO building was. And if we were there at just the right time, we would see the sun on his journey crossing between the building tops from our side to the RPO building side. When I was lucky enough to see him like that, I'd lean my face forward and take in as much of his nourishment as I could. And if Rosa was with me, I'd tell her to do the same. After a minute or two, we'd have to return to our positions. And when we were new, we used to worry that because we often couldn't see the sun from mid-store, we'd grow weaker and weaker. Boy AF Rex, who was alongside us then, told us there was nothing to worry about, that the sun had ways of reaching us wherever we were. He pointed to the floorboards and said, "That's the sun's pattern right there. If you're worried, you can just touch it and get strong again." And that was from Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. Book 3, Part 1, Semana Santa. This year, Amadeo Padilla is Jesus. The Hermanos have been preparing in the dirt yard behind the Mirada. This is no silky-haired, rosy-cheeked, honey-eyed Jesus of the children, Jesus with the lambs. Amadeo is muscled, hair shaved close to a scalp scarred from teenage fights, roll of skin where skull meets neck. Amadeo is building the cross out of heavy, rough oak instead of pine. He's barefoot like the other Hermanos, who have rolled their cuffs and sing alabados. They have washed out their white pants, braided their disciplinas the old way, from the thick fibers of yucca leaves, mended rips in the black hoods they will wear to ensure the humility of this reenactment. The Hermano Mayor, Amadeo's skinny grand tío, Tive, who surprised them all when he chose his niece's lazy son, plays the pito, and the thin piping notes rise. Today Amadeo woke with the idea of studding the cross with nails to give it extra weight. He holds a hammer with both of his hands high above his head, brings it down with a crack. The boards bounce, the sound strikes off the outside wall of the Mirada and across the alley, the Idle Hour Cantina. Amadeo has broken out in a sweat. Amadeo sweats, but not usually from work. He sweats when he eats, he sweats when he drinks too much. 33 years old, same as our Lord, but Amadeo is not a man with ambition. Even his mother will tell you that, though it breaks her heart to admit it. Yolanda still cooks for him, setting a plate before him at his place at the table. And that was from The 5 Wounds by Kristen Valdez Quaid. Book 4, Chapter 1. I would be lying if I said my mother's misery has never given me pleasure. I suffered at her hands as a child, and any pain subsequently endured appeared to me to be a kind of redemption, a rebalancing of the universe, where the rational order of cause and effect is aligned. But now I can't even the tally between us. The reason is simple. My mother is forgetting, and there is nothing I can do about it. There is no way to make her remember the things she has done in the past, no way to baste in her guilt. I used to bring up instances of her cruelty, casually over tea, and watch her face curve into a frown. Now she mostly can't recall what I'm talking about. Her eyes are distant with perpetual tears. Anyone witnessing this will touch my hand and whisper, "Enough now. She doesn't remember, poor thing." The sympathy she elicits in others gives rise to something acrid in me. I suspected something a year ago when she began wandering around the house at night. Her maid, Kostya, would call me, frightened. "Your mother is looking for plastic liners," Kostya said on one occasion, "in case you wet your bed." I held the phone away from my ear and searched the nightstand for my glasses. Beside me, my husband was still asleep, and his earplugs glowed neon in the dark. "She must be dreaming," I said. Kostya seemed unconvinced. "I didn't know you used to wet the bed." I put the phone down and, for the rest of the night, was unable to sleep. Even in her madness, my mother had managed to humiliate me. And that was from Burnt Sugar by Avni Doshi. Book 5, Chapter 1. The wind came up into the house from the sound, and it blew Daisy and me around her East Egg mansion like puffs of dandelion seeds, like foam, like a pair of young women in white dresses who have no cares to weigh them down. It was only June, but summer already lay heavy on the ground, threatening to press us softly and heavily toward the parquet floors. We could not stand to go down to the water, where the salt air was heavier still, and the long drive into the city felt like an offensive possibility. Instead, Daisy cracked open a small charm that she purchased on a whim in the Canes a few short years ago. The charm was made of baked clay in the shape of a woman, and when Daisy broke it into crumbling bits in her fingers, it released the basement smell of fresh kaolin clay mixed with something dark green and herbal. There was a gust of wind of a different kind, and then we were airborne, moving with a languid grace along the high ceilings of our house, and exclaiming about the strangeness and the secrets we found there. A single flick of our hands or feet sent us skimming through the air, at first adrift and then with surges of speed as we pushed away from the mantels and the columns. We discovered a rather shocking miniature tableau of Leda and the swan above the bookshelves in the library, and we were so quiet over the heads of a pair of maids that we could flick back their starched white caps before they saw us and shrieked. In the nursery, while Pammy slept, we floated above her like slightly rumpled guardian angels. Daisy reached down to touch her daughter's face with a gentle finger, but when the little girl stirred, Daisy fled, dragging me out of the room with her. And that was from The Chosen and the Beautiful by Nevo. And finally, Book 6. If you were to put a blade through any sphere and divide it into two perfect halves, the circumference of the cut side of each half would be a great circle. That is, the longest circle that can be drawn on a sphere. The equator is a great circle. So is every line of longitude. On the surface of a sphere, such as the Earth, the shortest distance between any 2 points will follow an arc that is a segment of a great circle. Points directly opposite each other, like the North and South Poles, are intersected by an infinite amount of great circles. Little America 3, Ross Ice Shelf, Antarctica, March 4th, 1950. I was born to be a wanderer. I was shaped to see the earth like a seabird to a wave. Some birds fly until they die. I have made a promise to myself. My last descent won't be the tumbling helplessness kind, but a sharp gannet plunge, a dive with intent aimed at something deep in the sea. I am about to depart. I will try to pull the circle up from below, bringing the end to meet the beginning. I wish the line were a smooth meridian, a perfect taut hoop, but our course was distorted by necessity, the indifferent distribution of islands and airfields, the plane's need for fuel. I don't regret anything, but I will if I let myself. I can only think about the plane, the wind, and the shore so far away where land begins again. The weather is improving. We fixed the leak as best we can. I will go soon. I hate the never-ending day. The sun circles me like a vulture. I want a respite of stars. And that was from The Great Circle by Maggie Shipstead. Okay, well, to start out, a lot of these books made it to the finals, so that's kind of exciting. And starting with book number 1, The Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois, that one actually won first place, the gold medal in 2022. And it is, I remember it as a really sweeping and philosophical story about a black family through the ages, and comparing it to the writings of W.E.B. Du Bois, who was somebody who tried to shape a lot of black culture and black ambition, especially in the days after slavery. And I think this book, in a way, was comparing his ambitions to the reality of a family. And obviously, the tone is a bit grandiose. And I think people have different thresholds when it comes to being, taken in by that. I think some of this language to me kind of turns me off a bit because because I'm drawn to specific characters and situations, and this is very much trying to be. And this, beginning part is very much above specific characters and situations and is trying to draw this grand tapestry about the importance of the family. But so far there isn't anything to weight it down with, any sort of evidence yet. So, for me, there was a little bit, I think I remember, a little push and take. Although I think I rated this relatively highly, and it was a very ambitious and long book about this family and about characters and the various things they faced. So probably worth a read if you're, into books that, made it high in people's estimation, even beyond the BookTube prize, of course. For book number 2, Clara and the Sun, I had trouble with this book, and I think it's because I like science fiction and literary fiction usually to stay in their lanes, and this didn't. And ultimately, with the rest of the story, Clara was this sort of figure. She's a a robot basically, meant to be, a companion to humans without being human herself. And it's like he was trying to do both things with her. Like she wasn't human enough to be a character, but she was all still put in those places where she was supposed to relate to human characters. And I just find that very difficult. I'm a character reader, and Clara is too one-dimensional for my tastes. And even from this first page, you can just tell how innocent she is. The way that she refers to the sun, like as this, being that's around her, rather than understanding its scientific realities. There's just something that's very juvenile about it, and I found it difficult to relate to, especially in adult fiction. Book three was my favorite book, I'm sure of it. I remember this, The Five Wounds by Kristen Valdez Quaid, which did make it to the finals, although it didn't medal. For me, I mean, you can see it right here on this first page. There are specific characters, a specific circumstance, and, some background characterization to them. We see that Amadeo is a 33-year-old man taking part in a community reenactment of Jesus on the cross. And we see that he's kind of like not the sort of vaulted community figure you might expect to get this honor, that he's seen as sort of lazy and that he's still relying on his mother for everything, and the community is kind of raising a side eye about why he's involved. But he is, and we see that, he's a burly, muscly man. He seems to be trying to think up ideas about this reenactment. And he has, a history behind him, like teenage fights and that sort of thing. And so that's what we have to go on. And from there, there's just such interesting characters. There's Amadeo, his daughter, who's recently pregnant, his mother, who is this matriarch taking care of a family that's been, flailing a bit. And I was just really taken in with strong writing and strong characterization. I believe this was expanded from a short story, and later in 2022, I even read Quaid's short story collection and really fell for those stories as well. They were also with, deep characters and situations, and I talked about her, I think, in my mid-year book Freakout Check-In Tag, about how I'd want to, keep my eye on her to see what she publishes next, and I'd be interested to read it. So this was definitely my highlight of the BookTube Prize and this ballot. Then we go to Burnt Sugar, and I really like this opening scene, although that might be my own bias. People have different, thresholds when it comes to unlikable narrators, and this is definitely an unlikable narrator. She comes in with an agenda of wanting to hurt her mother because of, past grievances, rather than, moving on in a mature sort of way. She's obviously an adult child. Her mother, only in unusual circumstances would she and her mother be younger, because her mother seems to be dealing with dementia, which usually befalls, senior citizens. So that's what we're dealing with. But it's just so delicious, all of the ways that she talks about her regrets that her mother's dementia has put a damper in her trying to get her revenge, because her mother doesn't remember and everyone feels bad for her mother. And even her mother bringing up old memories when she was young, she's using as, more grievances against her. And I just, the characterization is so strong. And I enjoyed this book as well, I remember. It takes place with an Indian family, and I feel like socioeconomically it's a type of family, maybe somewhat lower middle class, that I haven't usually read in Indian fiction. So that was intriguing too. I know the mother was part of an ashram. But yeah, once again, I think it comes down to really intriguing characters, so I remember enjoying this book. Then book 5 is one of the first Great Gatsby retellings after Great Gatsby went into the public domain. This is The Chosen and the Beautiful by Nhi Vo. I think it was probably one of the most famous Great Gatsby retellings, really, well regarded at the time, made it, into the BookTube Prize and all that too. And I liked it. It gave interesting, fresh perspectives to, cast Jordan, who's a secondary character, as a Vietnamese character, and then we get to look at a different part of U.S. history in the Great Gatsby frame of reference, which, after all, even in and of itself is about, new realities and new people coming into money and people chasing the American dream and what have you. I don't think I like this as much as a lot of other people, though. And a big part of that actually was to do with the magic, which on this page is kind of interesting because this page mirrors when Nick actually comes across Daisy and Jordan for the first time, where they're languid and bored in the heat, and they can't do anything. You know, there's no air conditioning, there's no TV, you know, all of that. So they're just languid and bored and stuck. But, you know, with magic, they get to, you know, fly around, which is fun. But again, my own biases like more distance. Like, you know, magic in this sort of setting usually doesn't do much for me. That's just not how, you know, I like to interact with the idea of magic in fiction, of just, you know, a way for two bored women to fly around. I don't know. It didn't even give us all that much interesting about them, just the weird things they got to do. I don't know. And then also beyond that, into the rest of the story, I feel like it was a little too much have your cake and eat it too, because ultimately Gatsby's home in this story is like over a magical hellmouth sort of situation. So the fact that the magic wasn't contained to Gatsby and what he was able to achieve, like, lessened its power. That, you know, Jordan and others throughout the story could also use magic. Like, then it wasn't, you know, connected to Gatsby's story of, you know, getting power for himself, which is a bit of the crux of The Great Gatsby as a story. He's a man who's able to change his destiny in both the original story and in this story. And then the questions are, how much of your, you know, changed circumstances can really change who you are and your ability to get what you want? And how much, you know, can money or magic do that for you, I guess? And that's the most interesting question, I think, and I feel like it got muddied in this story. And finally, we end with The Great Circle by Maggie Shipstead, which won third place, the bronze medal in 2022. Although I feel like my memory is people were really mixed on it. It's a story with a split narrative, because we're following like a aviator in the style of Amelia Earhart, who, you know, went missing, you know, in her plane in flight. And so this new character also went missing in her plane and in flight. And in the beginning of, or the end, I should say, of this first page, it seems like, you know, we're with her while that's starting to happen, although it seems like this author's also trying to have her cake and eat it too. Like, we're in the middle of her flying and in the middle of her looking back and saying, well, things are about to change. At least that's how I read this. And then the beginning of this page is, you know, more philosophical about, you know, circles and how it maps onto geography of the world, that sort of thing, which, you know, it's not character driven enough for me to be invested in for too long. But I gotta say, you know, it does seem important to the themes and the world building, if you would, of the story, and certainly the title. So a few paragraphs seems okay and decent. The second storyline has to do with creating a biopic, like a movie or a TV show about this woman, you know, decades later, based off of a book about her. And I actually found that section to be more interesting, which I think puts me, you know, against most other readers who found the historical, you know, context of this aviator's life more interesting. But I was more taken with the questions of veracity and, you know, differences with fact and fiction, and like getting to emotional truths and how things change, and, you know, in novels based off of history and movies based off of history, where the real truth lies. That sort of stuff kind of fascinated me, and the character who was playing the aviator and how she was struggling with it. I mean, it was a smaller part of the story, but I was really intrigued by it. But, you know, most everyone else thought that was, you know, a bit of a distraction from the real story. So in a way, I'm kind of surprised this book got as high as it did, but I also think that's part of the BookTube prize sometimes. Our opinions are so varied that sometimes, you know, what actually advances in the prize isn't like, you know, a majority winner, or if it is, well, it's a majority winner, but only by a slight margin rather than by the, you know, vast majority of us. So it would be interesting, certainly, to hear other people's thoughts of this book, or all of these books. You know, if you've read them as well, and what your feelings about them are. I would love to hear about them. And so that about covers it for me now. And I did, in fact, write Goodreads reviews for all of these books, so I'll leave those linked down below as well. And I hope to be back on this channel really soon with an author's answer video, another monthly series I do. I'm looking toward the end of the month, and I realize we have about a week left, and as usual during this time, that's when I'm starting to think, man, there's a lot of booktube videos I'd like to cram in, and the last week I was a little sparse, and now I have this final week, so we'll see how I do with that. And I hope you're all doing well with your booktube goals or your reading goals, and certainly to my fellow judges with your booktube prize goals as we're reaching the midway point of the finals, and we have our ballots due in a month. So I hope you're doing well with that and enjoying your reading. And thanks so much for watching, everyone. I'll see you next time.